Hi there, this is Ketty Davis, and I am here to talk about the CAASPP accessibility supports with you and provide some information to you about the different supports that are available to students during the Smarter Balanced assessments and how they connect to classroom teaching. As you know, CAASPP stands for California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress and includes not only the SBAC assessment, also the California Alternative Assessment, and beginning this year, the CAST assessment, which is the California Science Test that will be piloted in grades 5, 8, and high school. All tests are administered using technology and therefore must allow for supports for all students universally and also for those with specific disabilities. The goal really is to provide students with an opportunity to display their knowledge and learning, not only during classroom instruction and classroom assessments, but also these statewide assessments. We want to make sure the standardization of supports are provided statewide and across all our schools. As a state, this is very important because they increase the accuracy and validity of the test results. We've given you a couple of resources, and you'll see that there is what is now referred to as the bento box of assessment accessibility. Really, it's a chart, and this chart helps us to understand what is available for our students. You will see both up in the top, universal tools, designated supports, accommodations, and then resources for the California Alternative Assessment. We are going to begin with the universal tools. These are, up in the top section, available to all students. The universal tools are available at any time during the assessment and don't require any sort of recommendation or setup in the technology itself. You will see two columns in this English Language Arts section under the Embedded section. Embedded means that it's built into the assessment itself and it's available during the appropriate questions. Non-embedded means that they are provided by an outside source. Somebody has to provide the scratch paper. Somebody has to provide the break. The second category is designated supports. These are also available to all students, but only by teacher recommendation. Later on, there will be something for you to fill out and understand the process of how to identify or have a teacher recommend the appropriate supports for a student. And we want those supports to match what's happening in their regular classroom instruction. We don't want to assign all of these to all students because in some cases they can be very distracting when a student is on the test, taking their test and has all sorts of extra options available for them. Just like with universal tools, there are some of the supports that are embedded and need to be identified so that they are available when the student logs on to the assessment, and then some that are non-embedded, meaning they are provided by a teacher or some sort of outside source. In the bottom left corner, you'll see accommodations, which we're very thankful to our support staff and special education staff that works with families and students to identify along with you the accommodations appropriate for a student, either on the SBAC assessment or when taking the California Alternative Assessment. This bottom section is really not what we're talking about when we're working in this series to make you understand the accessibility supports and what's available for your students. We're really focusing in this top section of what is available to all students to make sure we have the appropriate setting for students when we head into this spring's assessments. You will see a copy of both English Language Arts and Mathematics, and actually also a copy for the Science Pilot test for you. Some of these items that are listed as embedded supports may not be particularly clear to you. We want to provide for you more information so you can understand what each of them are. Links to any of the resources that I am going to share with you right now are available on the Educational Services website. If you select the assessment page, you will see a link to each of the three: Crosswalk, the website, and the video clips I'll make reference to. Very briefly, the Crosswalk helps you to understand really what a definition is. Perhaps you noticed Digital Notepad as one of the universal tools that's available. This provides in the Crosswalk a description of it, what the practice actually is, and what it might look like when you're in a classroom using it. This would help you to identify, if you're reading from right to left, if this instructional practice is in place for a student and it's necessary to help support them in their learning and in their success. As you read over, it might be an item that is embedded and available for a student to use, and we want to make sure you know that and can identify that. The second is the CDE's website resource that actually then lists all of these and reminds you which category they fit in. You see an A next to Braille. That's an accommodation. That would be part of an IEP. Their specific team identifies this, and the test is ready to go and ordered for the student in Braille. Remember, universal. It's available to everyone. You use it as you choose. You don't need to identify or recommend anything. It's there and available. Really, our focus beginning this year is on designated supports because these are available to all students, but they must be identified and recommended prior to testing so that the testing environment is ready to go for the students when they log on. If the explanations in the crosswalk or on the website aren't enough, there is a district that has made their resources available to all of us in the state that have 1 minute or 10-second or 20-second video clips that may show you on a specific screen what that support looks like, so as you as a teacher could determine if that really is appropriate for a student you're concerned about. It is critical prior to deciding what is recommended or even following that students have time to familiarize themselves with the test and the tools that they have access to. Please remember in the CAASPP assessment, not only are there block assessments and interim tests that students can take for you to get feedback and for them to have an experience in the types of questions or environment that they're in, but there are practice tests and training tests. These two tests provide specific grade level practice and training in grade bands that help familiarize students with the interface features. This is critical for you to get a good understanding of what supports you might want. If you're not sure, this will give you a place to test it out with a student. It's not scored, nothing you need to grade, but it does give you an opportunity to allow students to practice and give you feedback on whether or not that support would be helpful. It's also a place for students to get very comfortable with the universal tools. Remember, those embedded tools are available to all students, but if they don't know where the Zoom is or the digital notebook or how to highlight, they may be at a disadvantage if this is something they use regularly in their classroom. So we really encourage you to take the time with your class, with your students, to go through the practice and training tests at various times. At this point, we really would like you to take a moment with your team to think about a few questions and then understand that coming soon is going to be the instructions on how you will identify those designated supports. If you truly have some students that would benefit from some of those embedded or non-embedded supports, there are some, as you saw in the top right corner of those bento box accessible support charts. There are some available to all students. And if they fit your students and match what supports are in the classroom, we want to make sure we're prepared for that this spring. But at this time, we ask your group to think about the questions on the screen in front of you and think about the extent that students are being directly taught how to use selected designated supports and accommodations. Can those practice and training tests benefit your staff and your students? Also think about to what extent your students are being provided with multiple opportunities to practice using those tools. If you do identify tools for them to use or those universal tools, how often are they getting to practice, and have you had a chance to actually teach them and support them in that use? Ultimately, do students use similar supports regularly in the classroom to those that they use on the assessment? And if that's the case, then we definitely want to provide you a way to recommend the supports that are needed. We thank you for participating in this information and overview. We want to reassure you that this intent is not to build a desire to practice the test regularly every moment. A lot of great instruction is occurring, but we also know with that instruction, you're providing appropriate supports, and we want to make sure if those fit also online with the accessibility supports available, that we've set up the online session to be just as supportive and helpful. If you have questions following this, we ask that you start with your site administration, and then we've provided them resources on where to go to next, and we have those resources ready and waiting. We look forward to coming back to you again with the instructions on how to handle the identification of designated supports, and let us know if you do have some teacher recommendation on what students may need on the test. Thank you for participating. Have a great day.